Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Mary, Mary by Ashley Farley, narrated by Tanya Eby. 1. The first rays of pink sunshine ushered in another day of suffering for the people who called Monroe Park in downtown Richmond home. An early winter storm had dumped 6 inches of snow on the city. With no clouds to blanket and warmth, temperatures had dipped into the teens for the 3rd night in a row. Scottie Darden parked her Forerunner alongside the dirty snowbanks on Main Street. She pulled her stocking cap down over her blonde mane and tucked her camera inside her down coat. Grabbing the 2 Bojangles bags and carton of coffee from the back seat, she trudged through the snow to a cluster of men and women huddled around a burning trash can. Eyeing the bags of food, the group of 5 homeless people navigated toward Scottie. She handed out sausage biscuits and paper cups of coffee. Scottie had stumbled upon the 5 by accident a year ago while investigating a series of muggings in the area. Their despondent faces had such a profound impact on Scottie that she'd returned the next day with warm blankets and buckets of fried chicken from Lee's. Their gratitude had moved her even more, and over the next 12 months, she'd stopped by on a regular basis, always delivering nourishment and supplies. She'd seen others come and go, but this core group of 5 banded together like a family. "I brought extras today." Scottie held up the second bag. Mabel gestured toward a row of makeshift tents 50 feet in front of them. Her name wasn't really Mabel, at least not as far as Scottie knew. With gray hair pulled back from her cafe au lait face, the old woman reminded Scottie of the housekeeper who once worked for her grandmother. Scottie had never exchanged names with any of the 5. She'd grown to know them by their physical appearances instead. Buck was a strapping black man of about 30, the one Scottie feared the most because of the temper she sensed smoldering just beneath the surface. Then there was Pops, the oldest male, with leathery skin the color of dark chocolate. While he never showed his teeth, Scottie often detected the hint of a smile tugging along his lips. She'd named the woman with the plain face and dull green eyes Miss Cecil, after her 3rd-grade teacher. She referred to the man in the wheelchair, with both legs amputated at the knee, as Dan, after Lieutenant Dan in the movie Forrest Gump. Scottie offered each of the 5 another biscuit before moving to the makeshift tents. She passed out biscuits to women and men who were buried under blankets and sleeping bags. She heard the faint sound of crying outside the 4th tent. She tapped lightly on the cardboard door. When no one responded and the crying grew louder, she pulled back the cardboard and peeked inside. "Hello in there," she called in a soft voice. "Can I interest you in some breakfast?" The crying intensified to a squall. Beneath a threadbare blanket, Scottie made out the unmoving form of an adult-sized body and the flailing limbs of a smaller figure next to it. "Hello." Scottie dropped to her knees and crawled inside. "Can I hold your baby for you while you eat a biscuit?" When the adult body remained still, Scottie peeled back the blankets to reveal a baby, 3 or 4 months old if she had to guess, with blonde peach fuzz on top of her head and a beet-red face. A girl, judging from the dirty pink fleece sleeper she was wearing. She pulled the covers back the rest of the way and gasped at the sight of the woman's gray skin and purple lips. Scottie assumed the woman was the baby's mother. She backed slowly out of the tent. "Someone, please help," she cried. "I think this woman in here is dead." The 5 fled the scene, along with every other homeless man and woman in sight. Scottie patted her pockets for her phone, then remembered she'd left it connected to the charger on her bedside table. She surveyed the area for help. A policeman, a student, a businessman on his way to work, but the park was deserted. Scottie crawled back inside and picked up the baby, rocking her back and forth until she settled down a bit. She scooted over closer to the baby's mother and checked her wrist and neck for a pulse, but there was none. The woman had been dead long enough for her skin to grow cold. Her eyes were closed, but her rosy lips were turned up into a smile, as though she'd seen an angel. Poor woman was probably no more than 20 years old. Scottie pulled the blanket over the woman's face and said a silent prayer. Getting to a phone to call for help was the only thing on her mind when she zipped the baby inside her coat and made a dash for her car. 2. Scottie laid the baby in the passenger seat next to her. She started the engine and cranked up the heat. With one hand resting on the baby's chest, she navigated the back streets to the fan toward home. She had driven several blocks before her heart rate slowed, and she began to process the situation. The medical examiner would take possession of the young mother's body to await identification by the next of kin, if there even was a next of kin. The woman had been living on the streets. Where was her family? And what about the baby's father? The makeshift tent they'd been sleeping in was tiny, too small for another body. Then there was the matter of an autopsy. Scottie assumed the mother had died of hypothermia, but what if that wasn't the case? What if the young woman had overdosed on drugs, or worse, if her scorned lover had murdered her during the night? Scottie hadn't seen any blood, at least not in the upper region of the body, but that's not to say she hadn't been stabbed in the gut. Scottie's mind raced. If the woman had in fact been murdered, she had not only tampered with evidence at the scene of a crime, she had wrongfully taken the child away from the scene. She pulled up in front of her row house on West Avenue and put the SUV in gear. She beat the steering wheel with the palm of her hand. "God, Scottie, how could you be so stupid?" she said in a voice loud enough to make the baby cry. "Shh, don't cry," she said, rubbing the baby's tummy. What would become of the baby? Scottie didn't think the Commonwealth had the authority to place the baby up for adoption without permission of next of kin, which meant the baby would be placed in a foster home until the police could track down the father. If the father even wanted the child, if the father even knew he was the father. The baby began to wail, presumably with hunger. "Don't worry, little one." She picked the baby up and held her tight. "We'll get it all sorted out. In the meantime, I've plenty of formula and diapers to keep you comfortable." By the time Scottie got the baby inside and mixed up a bottle from the supplies in her baby cabinet in the kitchen, the little girl was screaming, flailing her arms and legs in hunger. Scottie plopped down on the leather sofa in the adjoining family room, propped her snow boots up on the coffee table, and brought the bottle's nipple to the baby's mouth. The infant took the nipple between her lips, then thrust it back out with her tongue. Scottie turned the bottle upside down on her arm, letting a few drops of formula leak from the hole in the nipple, before returning the nipple to the baby's lips. When she tasted the formula, the baby began to suck greedily. "Careful now, baby girl. Don't drink too fast or you'll upset your tummy." The baby stared up at Scottie with bright eyes. "We need to give you a name, don't we?" Scottie had been in the process of picking out names for her baby when her daughter was stillborn at 31 weeks. She'd been torn between Kate and Liza, after her grandmothers, Catherine and Elizabeth. She ended up calling the baby Angel, which seemed appropriate for an innocent child who never drew her first breath. Scottie's eyes traveled the room, coming to rest on the nativity scene on the mantel above the fireplace. "Why don't we call you Mary, after the Virgin Mary?" She caught sight of the needlepoint pillow Brad had brought down from the attic, a green background with "Merry Christmas" in curly-Q script in red across the front, or Mary with an E, which seems appropriate for a spunky little girl like you. The baby stopped sucking and smiled up at her. "I agree," Scottie said. "I like them both as well. Mary, Mary, it is then." Scottie drew in a deep breath and sank further into the sofa. Exhausted already, and it was only 11 o'clock in the morning. She reached for the remote control and powered on the television, tuning into the local ABC affiliate. The cast of The View was seated around a table discussing the day's news. Scottie was certain a unit had been dispatched to the park by now, although the discovery of a dead homeless person was rarely considered breaking news. She wondered how long it would take the police to learn of the missing baby. Scottie thought of her cell phone charging on the bedside table upstairs. As soon as Mary finished her bottle, she would call the police and explain the situation. No harm would be done, and they'd whisk the baby off to a foster home, where she'd spend the rest of her life neglected and abused. "That's settled then, Mary. I don't see any harm in providing you with a warm place to stay and all the formula you can eat. At least, not until the authorities locate your family." Scottie removed the bottle from Mary's mouth and lifted the baby to the burp cloth on her shoulder, rubbing her back until she let out a loud burp. "That's a good girl. I bet you feel better now." She returned the baby to the crook of her arm and gave her back the bottle. Scottie watched Mary's eyes dart around the room, from the table lamp beside them, to the canned light in the ceiling, to the Christmas tree in the corner. Brad had dragged the tree home a week ago and strung it with lights, but so far, Scottie lacked the motivation to hang the ornaments. She wasn't in the mood for celebrating the holidays this year. Following the loss of her baby in March, Scottie's father suffered a near-fatal heart attack and subsequent quadruple bypass in April. Even her job as a freelance photojournalist, which had always inspired her, had begun to dishearten her lately with the constant arguing between the political parties in Washington and the endless mass shootings. Terrorist groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda remained a threat, but Americans killing Americans en masse on American soil was even more heartbreaking to Scottie. The faces of the 5 stared down at her from various positions on the wall. Brad had been after her to take down the framed photographs for some time. "All these sad and lonely people are depressing me," he'd said. Scottie visited the 5 a half-dozen times before she dared to bring out her camera. They didn't mind if she took their picture, as long as she handed out hot food in exchange. The emotions she captured were genuine and raw: anger and pain, loneliness and helplessness. She called her collection the Lost Souls. 2 or 3 more photographs, and she'd have enough for a gallery showing. The baby sucked the remaining formula out of the bottle and let out a contented burp. Good gracious, most men don't burp that loud. Mary tensed her body and scrunched up her face, grunting as she pooped. "I bet it's been a while since anyone changed your diaper," she said, and clucked her tongue at the baby. "But that's all right. We'll get you cleaned up in no time." Scottie carried the baby up the steep flight of stairs to the 2nd floor. After her first pregnancy ended in miscarriage, she'd been cautiously optimistic when she made it through the first trimester the 2nd time around. Even more so when her mid-pregnancy ultrasound revealed a completely formed fetus. Confident she would deliver a healthy baby, her friends had thrown her a big shower and outfitted her nursery with all the high-tech baby products on today's market. And Scottie had spent hours watching YouTube videos on every infant care subject available, from breastfeeding to bathing to bedtime routines. She laid Mary on the changing table and stripped off her filthy sleeper and rancid diaper, gasping at the sight of the infant's body. Dirt was caked in the creases of her skin, and a rash covered her neck and bottom. With the naked baby tucked under one arm, Scottie gathered the things she needed for her bath and headed down the hall to the bathroom. She filled the infant tub and lowered the baby into the warm water. Mary splashed and kicked the water with delight. "Looks like Mary likes her bath," Scottie cooed. She lathered the baby with soap, then rinsed away the dirt with a soft washcloth. She lifted her out of the tub, dried her thoroughly, and wrapped her in a hooded towel for the trip back to the nursery. After coating Mary's bottom in Desitin cream, she squeezed her into a newborn-sized diaper and maneuvered her little limbs into the largest sleeper she could find. "First chance we get, we'll go shopping for supplies." Once in her crib, Mary fell asleep before Scottie could close the blinds and turn off the light. Scottie stretched out on the twin bed beside the crib. "No wonder my friends with babies are always complaining about being tired," she thought, before drifting off to sleep. 3. The ringing of the doorbell, followed by the loud tapping of the brass knocker, woke Scottie an hour later. Mother. Only Barbara Westport announced her arrival with such enthusiasm. Scottie hopped to her feet and tiptoed out of the nursery. She was halfway down the stairs when the bell rang again. Scottie swung the front door open. "Geez, Mom, give the doorbell a rest. I heard you the first time." Her mother eyed Scottie's disheveled appearance. "Time to get up, sweetheart. I thought you'd given up sleeping until noon in college." Barbara brushed past her in a cloud of Chanel No. 5 perfume. "For your information, I was taking a nap." Scottie followed her mother through the house to the back room. "I got up at the crack of dawn to work this morning." Barbara stopped in front of her bare Christmas tree. "And just what have you been working on? Obviously not your tree." Scottie's parents lived on a spread of land in Goochland, 20 minutes west of Richmond toward Charlottesville. Every year, on the day after Thanksgiving, her mother decked their Dutch colonial farmhouse out in boughs of holly and every other kind of evergreen that grew on their property. Aside from her LL Bean gumshoes, Barbara appeared the picture of elegance, dressed in gray flannel slacks, a gray cashmere sweater, and a lavender wool cape. Her dark hair and eyes were in stark contrast to her daughter's. Scottie took after her father's Swedish ancestors, while her brother Will was the spitting image of their mother. "I plan to finish the tree today, Mom. I've been working on my series." Her mother shot a glance at the lost soul photograph nearest her. "Please tell me you haven't been in the slums taking pictures of those filthy vagrants again." Barbara was no stranger to volunteer work. She frequented soup kitchens and raised money for a number of different charities. One year she served as Christmas Mother for the Times-Dispatch Christmas Mother Fund, a program that raised funds to provide toys, clothing, food, and other assistance to needy families and children across the area. "I was delivering hot food to the homeless. I don't see how that's any different than working in a soup kitchen." "There's a big difference, Scottie, and you know it. You won't catch me venturing into unsafe neighborhoods." Barbara wagged her finger at Scottie. "And you shouldn't either. Your husband and I don't see eye to eye on much, but his concern about the safety of your hobby is one thing we have in common." Scottie's parents had warned her against marrying Brad. They'd not only been concerned about their daughter getting married right out of college, they'd also seen straight through Brad's big talk. "Don't be so quick to believe everything he says, honey," her mother had warned, while her father had suggested they wait a year or two until they got to know each other better. When all their attempts to persuade Scottie to postpone the marriage failed, her mother had even begged them to try living together first, a proposal that contradicted her parents' traditional values. "I'm 30 years old, Mom. I can take care of myself." "I'm not so sure about that, if the state of your home is any indication." Barbara noticed the nativity scene above the fireplace. "At least you decorated your mantel." "Ha! I never took it down from last year." "Well, then." Barbara dropped her Stella McCartney hobo bag on the sofa. "Lucky for you I'm free this afternoon. We can have this tree decorated in no time." Scottie picked up the purse and handed it back to her mother. "Thanks, Mom, but I can handle the tree myself. I'll probably wait until Brad gets home anyway." Her mother arched a manicured eyebrow. "I didn't realize Brad was away." "He's gone to California for his annual Christmas visit with his family." "Ah, yes, the Phantom Fam." Scottie hated it when her mother threw her own words back in her face. Brad's family wasn't exactly a figment of their imaginations. They'd all met his obnoxious, opinionated parents when they came for their wedding 7 years ago. They'd just never returned to Virginia again. Never mind that he never asked Scottie to go to California with him. The one time she'd confronted him about it, he'd made a lame excuse about being unable to afford the airfare. "Back off, Mom. Just because we live in the same city doesn't mean I have to report every detail of my life to you." "You're right. Sorry. I was out of line." Barbara hoisted her bag onto her shoulder. "At least let me run out and grab a wreath for your front door and a poinsettia for your table." "No, really, Mom, you don't need to worry. It won't be the end of the world if I don't go all out for Christmas this year. I'm not exactly in the holiday spirit." Barbara ran her finger down Scottie's cheek. "I know it's tough, sweetie. Just hang in there. You'll get your baby soon." As if on cue, the faint sound of a baby crying came from down the hall. Barbara's eyes grew round, like chocolate peppermint patties. For the first time, she noticed the can of formula on the kitchen counter. "What's going on, Scottie? Is there something you haven't told me?" "Like what, Mom? Like God dropped a baby down from heaven into my arms?" Scottie kept a straight face despite the irony in her words. "Anna asked me to babysit for Emily while she's at the dentist." "That's pretty inconsiderate of her," Barbara said. "Please, you know Anna better than that. She was in a jam because her sitter got sick at the last minute." All of her closest friends had babies, but Anna was the only one who considered Scottie's feelings. On Saturday afternoons and evenings, which were the loneliest times for Scottie, Anna's husband often took care of their daughter while Anna went shopping or to the movies and dinner with Scottie. And she was always careful to avoid baby-centered topics of conversation. Scottie took her mother by the arm and ushered her to the front door. "I'll see you Christmas Eve." She leaned in and gave her mother a peck on the cheek. "Do you need me to bring something?" Barbara dismissed Scottie's offer with a wave of her gloved hand. "The yellow umbrella is catering the dinner for me. Bring Brad, if you must, and make sure that rascal brother of yours is on time for a change." Scottie opened the door for her mother. "I'll see you before then." Barbara said over her shoulder as she took off down the sidewalk. "I have no doubt about that," Scottie mumbled, and closed the door against the cold. 4. Scottie dashed up the stairs to the nursery, where she found baby Mary lying in a pool of spit-up, her sleeper soaked through with poop. "Oh, honey, is your little tummy upset?" Scottie unzipped the sleeper, peeled the fabric back, and carried the baby at arm's length to the changing table. She cleaned the baby from head to toe with baby wipes and dressed her in the second-largest baby outfit, the only one she had left that would fit her. "I guess we better go on that shopping trip sooner rather than later." She stripped the crib of the soiled linens and carried them downstairs to the laundry closet. With the baby sucking hard on her thumb in the crook of her arm, Scottie opened her laptop on the kitchen counter and began to surf the internet with her free hand. "Now, let's see what Mr. Google says about your upset tummy. My guess is your mama's been breastfeeding you. Hopefully it's just a transitional issue." The fingers of her right hand slid across the keyboard. "Yep." She pointed at the screen as she read, "Says here, the doctors recommend trying a new formula for at least 3 days before switching." She closed the laptop and looked down at the baby. "Don't go getting sick on me, little Mary. I don't know how I would explain your sudden appearance in my life to the pediatrician, even if he is my best friend's husband." Mary smiled at her from behind her thumb. Aside from her chapped cheeks, the baby appeared healthy, which was amazing considering she'd been living outdoors. Not to mention the recent snowstorm and subzero temperatures. Who knew what was written in the medical histories of the biological parents, or what kind of addiction issues the mother had passed along to Mary? She didn't appear to have any abnormalities, but one could never be too sure in these situations. Although the image of the dead woman's face would forever be imprinted on Scottie's mind, the woman's condition made it difficult to determine whether she'd been attractive. Scottie viewed Mary as a lovely baby with her bright blue eyes and pert little nose, as pretty as any mother would hope for her own little girl. Mary seemed content to ride along in the baby carrier strapped to Scottie's torso, facing out, while she brought down the bouncy seat and other equipment from the nursery. As soon as the daycare center was organized in the family room, Mary began to fuss for her bottle. Scottie fed and burped her, then fastened her in the bouncy seat in front of the Christmas tree. "There now," she said, running her hand across the blonde peach fuzz atop Mary's head. "You look at the pretty lights while I go to the attic for the ornaments to decorate this tree." Racing up and down the stairs, Scottie made 4 trips to the attic for the Christmas decorations. She let the baby touch every shiny ornament before placing it on the tree. She was teetering on the stepladder, trying to attach the star to the top of the tree, when Mary had another blowout. Scottie quickly changed the diaper and started another load of laundry. In an attempt to stay calm, she reminded herself that the online doctor had advised against switching formulas before the baby's digestive system had a chance to adjust. The afternoon dragged on. Long, lonely hours on a cold, gray day. No wonder her friends scheduled play dates every afternoon. While the baby napped in her pack-and-play, Scottie removed the photographs in her Lost Souls series from the walls and replaced them with contemporary paintings she'd created in her art classes at UVA. Splashes of bright colors that resembled nothing, but went a long way toward cheering up the room. She watched the Doctor duo on television, Oz followed by Phil, folded a load of laundry, then thumbed through several of the baby care books she'd received as shower gifts. Desperate for adult conversation, she was happy to hear her husband's voice when he called around 5.
"Oh, babe, I hate to tell you this, but I forgot to pay the power bill. I got an email notification. If we don't pay it by noon tomorrow, they're going to disconnect our service."
Scottie jumped to her feet. "Are you kidding me, Brad? That's the one bill you're responsible for paying. How could you let it go past due?" Early on in their marriage, when it became apparent Scottie would be the major breadwinner, they decided he would take care of the power, cable, and internet bills, and she would pay for everything else. Considering how much he liked his electronics and gadgets, she felt confident he would keep these bills current. Would he ever stop disappointing her? He breathed loudly into the phone.
"Okay, don't be mad. I really messed up, babe. Commonwealth Power has always given me an extension before. I don't understand why they're playing hardball this time, but they're threatening to turn the power off if they don't get full payment by noon tomorrow."
Scottie ran her hand through her tangled curls. "Are you telling me you don't have the money to pay the bill?" He sighed.
"I used it to buy my plane ticket."
"How much is the bill, Brad? I don't have an extra $100 lying around."
"According to the email, we owe $511, he said.
"Wait a minute, what? Our bill has never been that high."
"Actually, we're 3 months past due. I'm so sorry. I really screwed up this time."
"That's just great, Brad. I have exactly $600 in my savings account." She imagined herself shivering under a mountain of blankets with the baby curled up next to her, hardly any different than living in a makeshift tent in Monroe Park. "Where's the bill? I'll pay it first thing in the morning."
"Well, would you believe me if I told you the dog ate it?"
He imagined his silly smile, the "oops, I messed up, but you gotta love me anyway" grin she once found so charming. "We don't have a dog, Brad." She started to hang up, but added, "Oh, and Brad, you can forget about getting a Christmas present from me." She threw her phone down on a leather chair across from her. Her husband was not the same man she'd married, the guy with the 3.8 GPA in pre-med who graduated in the top third of his class from UVA. That guy had had a bright future ahead of him as an orthopedist. After graduation, he'd taken a part-time job bartending to allow for more time to study for the MCAT. But that part-time soon became full-time, with all thoughts of medical school forgotten. Scottie's feelings about her husband and her career and starting a family stayed in constant conflict with one another. Her body was a battlefield of emotions, the North versus the South all over again. The sensible part of her, her brain, encouraged her to leave her husband and move to Washington or New York, where the big photojournalists play ball. The emotional side of her, from her neck on down, including her heart, where the souls of her future children resided, and her empty womb, where her biological clock ticked like a time bomb, ached for a baby. The gnawing sensation in her gut, the one she should trust but rarely did, cautioned her about bringing a baby into their crazy lives. Scottie traveled 2, 3, sometimes 4 days a week investigating breaking news stories. Daycare was out of the question with Brad working most nights. They'd have to hire a sitter, which would eat into his nominal take-home pay. If he'd followed through on his original plan, he would be finishing up his residency right about now and looking for a practice to join. Instead, he was living paycheck to paycheck, using the money for their electric bill to pay for an airline ticket to visit his worthless family. The first red flag for Scottie had been the ease in which Brad settled into the lifestyle of a bartender. The late hours suited him, and he seemed to gain something from listening to other people's problems. Perhaps the satisfaction of knowing his life wasn't as screwed up as some. She'd encouraged him to consider psychiatry, but he seemed none too eager to return to the classroom. Academically, he'd burned himself out in high school and college, and he simply couldn't handle the daunting task of returning to the classroom. She'd seen glimpses of the old Brad when she was pregnant. He'd made strides to find a better-paying job by updating his resume and interviewing for sales positions at several medical supply companies. He'd been devastated when Scottie lost the baby. She wasn't a quitter, and she didn't want to give up on her marriage. If only they could have a healthy baby. Noticing Mary staring up at her from the pack-and-play, Scottie said, "But that's nothing for you to worry about, little one. I've dealt with worse crises than a past-due bill." She lifted the baby out of the playpen. "Are you getting hungry? I could use a cup of tea." She poured Enfamil into a bottle for Mary and brewed a cup of chai tea for herself, then settled with the baby on the couch to watch the local 6 o'clock news. To her relief, there was no mention of a dead body in Monroe Park. Mary sucked down 2 more small bottles and had 3 explosive bowel movements before Scottie finally put her down a few minutes before 11. She turned on the television in her bedroom and listened to the late news while washing her face and brushing her teeth. At the very end of the newscast, the female anchor reported the discovery of an unidentified body in Monroe Park. The announcement lasted less than a minute, with no mention of the victim's gender, the time of discovery, or a missing baby. Relieved, Scottie slid beneath her thick duvet cover, rolling onto her side and curling up to her pillow. She tossed and turned with worry, and not just about the baby's gastrointestinal problems. She'd disclosed too much to her mother about her whereabouts that morning. Barbara was a curious, resourceful woman. If and when the missing baby made the news, she would know the crying she'd heard was not Emily. Scottie finally gave up and crawled in the twin bed in the nursery.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?